Imagine this: a stadium with a capacity of more than 100,000 people, a venue often described as a cathedral of sports, an icon built not only for football, but also as a symbol of scale, ambition, and prestige. Host cities have spent years preparing. Hotels have expanded their workforce. Governments have allocated budgets. Businesses have invested with the expectation that a wave of international visitors would arrive. Everything was designed to achieve one outcome: a packed stadium, an electric atmosphere, the biggest World Cup in history. And yet, just weeks before kickoff, hundreds of thousands of seats remain unsold across multiple host venues. Not a few thousand, not a small shortfall that can easily be overlooked, but hundreds of thousands. For a tournament often called the world's game, this is not simply a story about slow ticket sales. Major events frequently experience a surge of last-minute purchases. Fans wait to finalize their travel plans. Excitement builds as the opening match approaches. But when such a large number of tickets remain available so close to the start of the tournament, questions begin to emerge. If global interest in football has never truly declined, if television audiences continue to grow, if sponsors were lining up years in advance, then why are so many seats still empty? Is this merely a temporary supply and demand imbalance? Or could it be the first sign of something deeper, a shift in how the modern World Cup balances the celebration of football with an increasingly aggressive commercial strategy? To understand what is really happening, we need to take a closer look. Now, let's zoom in on the picture. Just days before the tournament officially begins, a friendly match involving one of the world's top national teams takes place in the United States. This is not an obscure team. This is one of the most widely followed football nations on the planet. The stadium has a capacity of nearly 70,000 seats. Yet when the match kicks off, tens of thousands of those seats remain empty. Not just a few scattered rows tucked away in the corners, but large sections of vacant seats that are clearly visible on television broadcasts. What makes this especially striking is that when the same team plays at home, stadiums are almost always sold out. Even ordinary friendly matches can attract crowds of 80,000 fans. The atmosphere is intense, the chants are relentless, and the entire event feels like a celebration. The contrast between those two images cannot be ignored. The issue is not the popularity of the team, nor is it a lack of passion from supporters. So what created that gap? Part of the answer lies in geography. International fans must pay for flights, hotels, and transportation between cities. Another factor is ticket pricing, which is significantly higher than what many supporters have traditionally been accustomed to. But perhaps the most important factor is timing. That match took place just before the World Cup. For fans planning to attend the tournament itself, a decision had to be made. Should they spend money on a friendly match or save their budget for the games that matter most? That choice reveals something important. Demand has not disappeared. People still care. People still want to watch. But purchasing behavior is changing. And when consumer behavior changes, the market begins to respond. To understand why empty seats are beginning to appear, we need to look at a structural change at the heart of the ticketing system: dynamic pricing. For the first time in World Cup history, ticket sales are being managed with dynamic pricing on a large scale. What does dynamic pricing mean? Ticket prices are no longer fixed. They change based on market demand. When demand rises, prices increase. When demand falls, prices can be adjusted downward. From an economic perspective, this is a revenue optimization tool. Airlines use it, hotels use it, e-commerce platforms use it. But the World Cup is not just another commercial product. The problem begins when fans realize that the price they see today may not be the price they see tomorrow. A supporter checks ticket prices, early plans a budget, and then returns a few weeks later only to find that prices have increased significantly, sometimes by dozens of %. That uncertainty changes behavior. Instead of buying early, people wait. They wait to see whether prices will fall. They wait until the tournament is closer. They wait because they know the market may adjust. And when thousands of people make the same decision, what happens? Early sales begin to slow. The number of unsold tickets appears unusually high. Images of empty seats start circulating before the tournament has even begun. A system designed to maximize revenue can unintentionally create the opposite psychological effect. If fans believe prices may decrease later, the rational decision is to delay purchasing. But when everyone delays at the same time, the system begins to weaken itself. Adding to the problem is the growing gap between original ticket prices and prices seen on secondary markets. Fans do not simply see expensive tickets, they see prices that feel unpredictable and difficult to understand. And when trust begins to erode, enthusiasm often slows with it. For decades, the World Cup has been viewed as a global celebration, a tournament that brings together supporters from every corner of the world. But as ticket pricing starts to resemble the behavior of financial markets, a larger question emerges. At what point does revenue optimization begin to outweigh the fan experience? Because the challenge facing the modern World Cup may not be a lack of interest. It may be the growing tension between treating supporters as participants in a global sporting festival and treating them as customers in an increasingly sophisticated commercial marketplace. If dynamic pricing began to change purchasing behavior, what happened next raised even deeper questions about transparency. In the weeks leading up to the tournament, analysts tracking ticket availability on the official platform noticed something unusual. Tens of thousands of tickets that had previously been listed as available suddenly disappeared from the system. They were not clearly marked as sold out. There was no detailed public explanation. They simply stopped appearing. The change happened quickly. For those closely watching the market, that created two possible explanations. Either a large number of tickets had been allocated to partners, sponsors, or internal distribution channels, or the visible inventory had been adjusted to influence perceptions of demand. When clear information is missing, a transparency gap begins to create suspicion. But that was not the peak of the story. Another incident soon unfolded on the official platform itself. Roughly several dozen fans completed the ticket purchasing process and received confirmation that their transactions had been successfully processed at a price of $0. They received confirmation emails. They believed they had stumbled upon an incredibly rare opportunity. For several days, everything appeared legitimate. Then a new message arrived. It was a system error. They would be required to pay the full ticket price within 1 week, or their tickets would be canceled. From a technical standpoint, correcting the mistake is understandable. But from the perspective of public perception, the message was far more complicated. The system made an error that benefited buyers. The system corrected that error by taking away the benefit. And the fans were ultimately responsible for paying the difference. At the very same time, tickets for the World Cup final were appearing on secondary markets at prices so high that they seemed almost unreal. The contrast was impossible to ignore. On one side were ordinary supporters being told to surrender the advantage created by a technical mistake. On the other side was a secondary marketplace operating at prices far beyond the reach of most fans. These events were not simply isolated accidents. They were symptoms of the same commercial structure. A structure built around maximizing value, controlling inventory, and responding to market forces in real time. And when that structure begins creating friction at multiple points simultaneously, the story stops being just about ticket sales. It becomes a story about trust. Because once fans start questioning whether the system is transparent, predictable, and fair, the issue is no longer how many tickets have been sold. The issue becomes whether supporters still believe the system is working for them. If the controversies surrounding the official ticketing system were not enough, the resale market revealed the issue even more clearly. While some supporters were dealing with the $0 ticket glitch and unpredictable price fluctuations, tickets for the World Cup final began appearing on resale platforms at prices reaching millions of dollars per seat. Not thousands, not tens of thousands, but figures far beyond what the overwhelming majority of fans could ever afford. the gap between original ticket prices and resale listings became enormous. And that is where a larger question began to emerge. Who is the World Cup really for? For decades, the World Cup was built around the idea of a global celebration. Fans from every corner of the world could save for years to fulfill a once-in-a-lifetime dream, sitting in the stands and becoming part of something much bigger than themselves. But when prices start to take on a speculative nature, when a ticket becomes a tradable asset rather than a pass to attend a match, the emotional relationship between fans and the event begins to change. Supporters no longer feel like participants. They begin to feel like outsiders looking in. And that is the heart of the issue. This is no longer just a story about supply and demand. It is a story about access. When dynamic pricing pushes prices upward based on demand, and secondary markets push them even higher through speculation, the system may succeed in maximizing revenue. But maximizing revenue is not the same thing as maximizing the fan experience. The World Cup was built on collective energy, on stadiums shaking from the sound of tens of thousands of voices, on the belief that people from different backgrounds could share the same unforgettable moment. When ticket prices begin filtering audiences according to financial power, the nature of the event starts to shift as well. And that is where the discussion becomes less economic and more emotional. Because fans are not simply purchasing a seat. They are purchasing a sense of belonging. They are purchasing the chance to be part of history. And when that feeling becomes too expensive, many supporters make a different calculation. They stop trying to get in. They stop waiting for prices to change. And, in some cases, they simply choose to stay home. That decision may not immediately appear on a financial report. But over time, it can have a far greater impact than any short-term revenue target. Because once fans begin to feel excluded from the world's biggest football celebration, rebuilding that connection becomes far more difficult than selling a ticket. Football is not just 90 minutes on the pitch. Football is sound. It is 60,000 people rising to their feet at the same moment. It is the roar that erupts when a goal is scored. It is the feeling of an entire stadium shaking beneath you. When a stadium is not full, the first thing that disappears is not revenue. It is energy. Empty sections in the stands are not simply vacant seats. They are silent spaces in the atmosphere. They are interruptions in the shared emotional rhythm of the crowd. The World Cup was once seen as a place where people from every background could come together. Students, workers, families who spent years saving for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, not just business executives or VIP guests. But when ticket prices become the biggest barrier, the makeup of the crowd begins to change. The event still takes place. Goals are still scored. The cameras still capture the action. Yet the feeling of a truly global celebration may no longer be quite the same. And when fans start choosing to watch from a screen rather than experience it in person, it is not because they have stopped loving football. It is because many of them no longer feel as welcome as they once did. That distinction matters. Because the strength of the World Cup has never come only from the matches themselves. It has always come from the people in the stands, the voices, the passion, and the belief that this was an event for everyone. Once that feeling begins to fade, replacing it becomes far more difficult than filling an empty seat. World Cup 2026 will most likely still be a financial success. Broadcast revenues will be enormous. Sponsors will remain highly visible. Historic moments will still be created. But the most important question is not found on a balance sheet. It is found in the stands. If empty seats continue to appear at a tournament designed to represent global unity, then this is no longer just a story about supply and demand. It is a market response. For generations, the World Cup was a dream that any supporter could aspire to, even if it required years of saving and sacrifice. But if that dream gradually becomes a privilege reserved for a small group with the highest spending power, then the nature of the tournament will begin to change as well. So is this simply the inevitable evolution of modern sports? Or is it a sign that the limits of commercialization have been pushed too far? Do you feel that ordinary fans are being priced out of the World Cup experience? And if this model continues, will future World Cups still preserve the spirit that made the tournament special in the first place? Because in the end, the market always delivers an answer. Not through headlines, not through press conferences, but through the choices people make, the seats they buy, the trips they take, and sometimes the events they decide not to attend. The question is not whether the market will speak. The question is whether we are willing to listen. And as the countdown to kickoff continues, that answer may be closer than many people realize.